Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And this is the final time you will ever hear me saying those words. This is our 269th and final episode. It has been quite a saga here in Buffalo. We started this playthrough May 18th of 2023. As I'm finishing this up, it's been over 10 months. It's March 24th of 2024. The new version of OOTP has been out for over a week. I've been playing around with that a little bit, and we are finally going to wind down this series. It's been incredible fun for me. Really appreciate all of the viewers and all of the commenters and all of the thoughts and input on what we've done and what we should do with this team. It's been incredibly interactive, and I sincerely appreciate everyone who has watched and interacted with us, whether it's been through all 269 episodes, as I know amazingly it has been with some of you, and thank you for that, or whether this is the first time you're ever checking us out. Thank you very much, and if you haven't signed up and subscribe to our channel, would appreciate if you do that. We put out lots of OOTP videos, whether they are playthroughs or tutorials or other things that happen to strike our mind. We've done some other games over the years, although has kind of become an OOTP-centric channel over the past year when you're putting out almost an episode a day, which is close to what we've done over the past year. It's going to be hard to do much else, and really going to miss this team. We are going to finish off the series with this final episode covering the years 2056 to 2060. That will give us 12 full seasons after we resigned after an incredible 127-win year and winning 4 out of 5 World Series. Felt like there wasn't much left to prove with the Buffalo Wings. They've gone on and won an 8th and 9th World Series championship in the 7 years that we have not been general manager of the team. However, in this past season, Buffalo missed the playoffs for the first time after 27 consecutive playoff appearances. So what's going to happen in these last 5 years of Buffalo? Will they recover and remain a perennial playoff team? Or was last year kind of a sign that the dynasty that we had built that was kept going for several years with the new management team is finally coming to an end? By the end of this episode, just about everybody who was a core player of our team should be retired and or near retirement. Hopefully we'll have another Hall of Famer or two over the next 5 years. I don't think there's any guarantees on that front. Right now, Deshaun Seifu and Alexis Barajas, the top position player and the top pitcher in the history of the franchise, have both recently been enshrined in the Hall. Taking a look at the 2056 Hall of Fame voting results, nobody was actually elected this year. We still have a couple of Buffalo Wings that are close. I tend to think that they probably are not going to get it. Actually, there's 3 Buffalo Wings if you include Max Clark, but he was only very briefly with us. But Daniel Rojas and Shamar Jenneret, both around the 60% mark. Jenneret in his 6th year on the ballot. Think it's unlikely that he'll make it. Rojas, 61.9% in a first year. That's a number that would indicate that he could get there. But he's still behind 2 other people in his class, Jameer Terzino and Max Zeiger, who didn't make it. So that could be a sign that when higher quality candidates hit the ballot over the next few years, Rojas is going to go down. Nehemiah Vidale, who was the ace of our final few teams in Buffalo, now eligible for the first time. He got 55.9%. Damian Bergman was briefly with us as a catcher back in the day. So still some familiar names receiving votes for the Hall of Fame. But we are going to move forward now and see what this Buffalo Wings team's expectations are for the 2056 season after their offseason is concluded. The big news at the end of the last episode was that our longtime stopper and more recently closer, Floyd Auclair, has signed with the Yankees. And Arturo Casares, who had a brilliant career, was a guy that we had picked up many, many moons ago. International free agent that we spent only $2 million on as an amateur, and he has a very storied career in Buffalo, as you can see by his hardware that he's earned here. Finished his Buffalo career 10 seasons with over 300 homers, close to 1,000 ribbies, and 44.5 WAR, including a league-leading 6.6 in 2050. So definitely disappointing to see Arturo Casares leaving, because there are very few legacy Buffalo Wings left at this point. And we've made it to opening day. A few other big-time players left. Jim Reichert, longtime first baseman and corner outfielder, signed a 3-year deal with the Cubs worth over $66 million. Jim Lance, who's been gone for a while, has kind of become a hired gun, and he is going to be with Philadelphia this year. You can see since he left Buffalo in 2051, the Phillies are going to be his 6th organization that he has pitched with. And Arturo Casares is going to be hurt as the season begins. Taking a look at the preseason predictions here, Yankees expected to be the best team in the American League, and our Wings are expected to go 90-72. I keep calling them our Wings. They're not my Wings anymore. But that would be a nice bounce-back year after missing the first playoffs for the first time in 28 seasons last year. We'll see if they can actually execute on the field and accomplish that. Taking a look at the Buffalo Wings and just how many familiar names are still around, there's not a lot. Jesus Heredia is a player that we drafted who has become a perennial 300 hitter for them at second base, having a really nice career. Juan Toledo is the last of the big three that was in the middle of our lineup for our last few championships alongside Reichert and Casares. You can see both of those players just lost this year. Well, you can't see that, but we talked about that. Danny Ferguson has been our third baseman for a long time. He was a guy who's a bit controversial at times, not an incredible offensive player over the course of his career, but has still put up a 110 WRC plus, and he's also become an excellent third baseman, winning 5 Gold Gloves over the course of his career, been a part of the Wings' 6 last championship team, so nice to see him around. And then Josh Fuchs is back. He was gone for a year, and he is back as the shortstop this year. This is a player who I had traded for from the Yankees, viewed him as a potential shortstop of the future, and he did have a long run with us. Thought he might be a Gold Glove quality shortstop. His range kind of declined a bit before he became a regular major leaguer. Worrying about his contact and his strikeouts were always the issues with him. Looks at this point like he's probably barely above a replacement level player, but there still are 4, actually, shockingly, make that 5 familiar names in the starting lineup. Juan Ramirez, who has been gone from Buffalo for a long time at this point, 2047, back with them almost a decade later in 2056. He was an international free agent, not an international amateur free agent that we had tried to sign to be a catcher. He ended up signing with an independent league, and we ended up purchasing him from the independent league team. Was a very good defensive catcher. The bat with him was always a concern. Pitching-wise, surprisingly, given the number of pitchers we invested in the draft over the years, only a couple familiar names. Caleb Leamy has been a starter for Buffalo the last several seasons. He was a guy who was just getting ready to become a major leaguer when we moved on. And then Ari Caper is a guy who we had brought up the last couple years that we were in Buffalo, kind of used him as an occasional starter, more of a reliever, but he has developed into a solid starter for the Buffalo Wings as well. So shockingly, 7 years after we've left, 5 familiar names in the lineup and a couple still in the rotation. And we'll see how these Buffalo Wings do here in 2056. And the Buffalo Wings are back in the playoffs, finished tied for the National League East crown with the Braves at 89 and 73. So honestly, when you consider that they moved on from both Arturo Casares and Jim Reichert this offseason, who are probably two of the 10 best offensive players in franchise history, the fact that they went from a team that didn't make the playoffs to back in the playoffs is pretty impressive. Toledo, 235 average, 27 homers, 91 ribbies. He's banged up right now. Danny Ferguson hit 249, 9 homers, 48 ribbies. Fuchs hit 240, and Ramirez really struggled, hit a $157. I'm guessing perhaps they moved on from the second baseman, which would be disappointing. I don't see him here on the injured list. Caleb Leamy, 11 and 10 with a 4.07 ERA, and Ari Caper was 12 and 11 with a 3.39 ERA. But it looks like they're going to have him in the bullpen for the series that they have coming up, which will likely be a 2 out of 3 wild card series. I'm assuming since Atlanta's listed first, that they have won the division by virtue of having had a better record against Buffalo. Reichert did hit his 400th home run this year. Joe Scott was traded. So my big question is, Ramiro Medina got his 2,000th hit this year. Ooh, Casares, a big injury, hit 242 with 15 homers before he got hurt for the season. And Heredia is still on the team. It looks like he's just out of the starting lineup. Still a shortstop, and he still hit over 300 this year. He only started 62 games, though. Now, granted, his range is not great. I don't know why they would have moved him to have him force started at shortstop, although it could just be because it was the last game of the year, and maybe he is still in the mix to be the second baseman. But a little surprising that a guy who's 28 years old and is a career 305 hitter, only started 62 games over the course of the season, still put up a 120 WRC plus, but it looks like the management team is moving in a different direction. We'll see what the Buffalo Wings can do here in these playoffs. Going to be facing the Diamondbacks in the first round, and after that, who knows? And the Wings did take out the Diamondbacks 2-1 in the wild card series, but then fell 3-2 to the division champion Atlanta Braves, although the Atlanta Braves only got that championship by virtue of a better regular season record against Buffalo in head-to-head matchups, but proved to be consistent with the playoffs as they took that series 3 out of 5. The Seattle Mariners are your ultimate champions here in 2056, beating the Braves 4-1 in the World Series. And another significant loss for the Buffalo Wings franchise, Juan Toledo, $113 million over 4 years to leave the Buffalo Wings for the Cubs. Former second baseman Ramiro Medina has a 3-year deal with Houston. He's been with Pittsburgh and Kansas City for an extended period at this time. At age 37, that could be the final contract of his career. Take a look here at the Hall of Fame voting. Doug Nugent and Jake Blymeister elected. Rojas 63.2%, Vidali 52.9%, and Jenneret falls to 49.8% in his 7th year. That is the lowest that he's ever been. So it seems unlikely that Jenneret or Vidali are going to make it. Rojas, unlikely also, but I think he's got more of a fighting chance than those other two players do. And as we get ready for the regular season, a couple of our former players were traded. Jim Reichert went from the Cubs to Nashville, and Joe Scott, I guess, wasn't traded, but he signed a deal with the Twins. The longtime closer, not a Well, he got 23 saves last year after having only 5 in 2055, so not as productive as he once was, but still has 636 career saves at the age of 42. And he's got to get a chance to add a few more this season for the Twins. Taking a look at the preseason predictions here, Yankees once again the best team on paper in the American League. Over in the National League, it looks like it may finally be over for the Buffalo Wings after that playoff appearance a year ago, projected to go 72-90 and be the worst team in all of the National League. Taking a look at the home screen, Heredia looks like he's back in as the everyday second baseman. Danny Ferguson's still around. Jim Weisenbach back at catcher. Looks like they moved on from Fuchs and brought back Weisenbach. Caleb Leamy still in the rotation. Looks like Ari Caper may have moved on over the offseason as well. So the number of familiar names declines every year. And the Buffalo Wings were not as bad as expected, but at 82-80, they did miss the playoffs for the second time in 3 seasons. Caleb Leamy, 11-11 with a 3.82 ERA. Weisenbach hit a .174. Oof, brutal. But Danny Ferguson, 261, 14 homers, 81 ribbies. One of his better offensive seasons in recent years. And Jesus Heredia hit .317, 7 homers, 49 ribbies, back in his traditional leadoff role for this Buffalo Wings organization in recent years. Casares, more injuries. Ramiro Medina, more injuries. That's what happens when you start getting old. Toledo out for a few weeks during the season. Casares did have a 3-home run game for the Mets. Ramiro Medina hit his 300th homer while playing for the Astros. So some familiar names in the news. Taking a look at the playoff coverage here. And the Mariners, Yankees, Dodgers, and Expos are your favorites. And in what sounds weird to say, the Orioles and the Marlins faced off in the World Series. The Orioles, 4-1 winners of the 2057 World Series Championship. 3 years to go, and our franchise of following the Buffalo Wings will be concluded. And before checking in on the 2058 Hall of Fame voting, Caleb Leamy dealt this offseason, 87-66 record with a 3.72 ERA in his career with Buffalo. And Danny Black, longtime top pitcher, actually not a longtime top pitcher, but for 4 glorious seasons, he was a very important pitcher at the end of our Buffalo dynasty, signing for over $20 million a year for 4 years with the Astros. Black at the age of 35 is 160 and 103 with a 355 career earned run average. Hall of Fame voting results, nobody elected this year. Jenneret up to 54%, Rojas down to 52%, and Vidale down to 43.4%. And Joe Scott, who never gets old, coming back for another season at age 43, had 15 saves for Minnesota last year with a 3 ERA, and he's going to be making close to $10 million in a 1-year deal with Detroit. Juan Toledo continues to suffer some injury issues at the age of 35, going to be out for about 4 to 5 weeks at the beginning of the season. Taking a look at the preseason predictions, the Orioles and the Twins expected to be among the best teams in the American League, and our Buffalo Wings expected to bounce back with an 88-win season, which would put them back in the playoffs if everything goes according to plan, which it usually does not. And in this 2058 season, 4 teams ended up separated by just 3 games in the National League. 3 of the 4 ended up in the playoffs. The Buffalo Wings did not. 83-79. They lost their final 3 games of the year to just miss out on the playoffs. Jesus Heredia, 299 average, 7 homers, 50 ribbies. And that, at this point, is the only familiar name in the Buffalo Wings lineup from a decade plus ago when we were running the organization. Pitching-wise, Joey Bills back with the team, 0-1 with a 3.20 ERA. He's 36 years old now. Team is definitely changing little by little, and not necessarily always in good ways, with another year missing the playoffs. And the Orioles are your world champions again here in 2058. You can see I'm having some non-responding time. It definitely takes a while to simulate all these games. Hopefully the game will bounce back and this won't just crash out on me. But the Orioles 4-3 winners over the Cardinals in a Battle of the Birds here in 2058. Another year and another ballot where nobody elected to the Hall of Fame. Rojas and Jenneret both in that 60% range. Nehemiah Vidale back down below 50. Looks real unlikely that any of those 3 will get in. Jenneret will likely be dropped from the ballot after next year when he finally has his 10th and likely final attempt. And Jim Reichert looks like his career may be nearing an end, but the 38-year-old did sign with the Dodgers this offseason for a little under $3.5 million. .251 career hitter, closing in on 2,000 hits, and has a chance at 500 home runs. Only hit 17 a year ago. He's going to need to be much more productive than that to get to 500 in his career. 121 ribbies away from 1,500, so some pretty big benchmarks ahead for Reichert. Certainly going to need to play more than 1 year to get them, and he's going to need to play pretty regularly over those 2 seasons as well. Last year he hit just .218 with 17 homers and 531 at-bats, so I think regular playing time may be difficult for Reichert to come by at this stage in his career. He could very well end up with a Shamar Jenneret type of career, just outside of Hall of Fame worthiness. And here in the 2059 season, the Tigers expected to be one of the top teams in the American League. The Buffalo Wings 86-76. That record would get the team back into the playoffs if they are able to do it. Taking a look at their proposed roster, and it looks like, Heredia is a DH now. That's interesting. I would think that they could maybe play him at third or something. It looks like he's never played third over the course of his career. He'd be an outstanding defensive first baseman, but I assume they know what they're doing. But Heredia moved to the number 2 hole in the lineup and looks like he's scheduled to be a DH, and doesn't look like there are any names that we were involved in originally signing, drafting, or recruiting to the team who are still on the pitching staff. And another year is in the books here in 2059, and the Buffalo Wings out of the playoffs for a 3rd consecutive year, out of the playoffs for a 4th time in 5 years. They did, however, rally significantly down the stretch to finish at 82-80, and that's important because it's a 32nd consecutive winning season for Buffalo. They've got 82, 83, and 82 wins the last 3 years, so they are keeping that streak by the minimum possible, but they still do have that streak. Jesus Heredia was leading the league in batting much of the season, ended up hitting .306, but missing out on a batting title. And it's kind of interesting. The three big players who were in the middle of the lineup and our last championship teams, all nearing the end of their careers. Arturo Casares, can see he combined for 12 homers and 58 ribbies and a 209 batting average between the Mets and Detroit this year. He's 37 years old. Would think that he'll try to come back next year, but other than 1 year with the Mets, has not really been vintage Casares since he left. Reichert did get his 2,000th hit this year, but you can see only a part-time player hit 221 with 9 homers and 41 ribbies. Unlikely that he's going to get to those 500 home runs or those 1,500 runs batted in. Wouldn't be shocking to see him retire. And Juan Toledo actually remains the most productive of that bunch. 287 average this year, 20 homers, 60 ribbies, and 345 at-bats. The injuries seem like a pretty significant issue for him. He's wrecked physically at this point. But a lot of gold gloves, several all-star appearances. He was a member of a number of world championship teams with Buffalo. And one home run away from 400 in his career, still boasting a 128 WRC plus, and he put up a 4.4 WAR this year, which was his best figure since his second to last year in Buffalo. So probably similar to Reichert and possibly Casares, and that he'll ultimately end up in the Hall of Very Good rather than the Hall of Fame. But I would think that Toledo, and granted he's younger than Casares, who's 37, and Reichert, who's 39, but seems likely that Toledo's going to last for a few more years, while Reichert and Casares are definitely close to the end. And before we check in on the World Series, we'll check in on Ernesto Zambrana. Not a man who was ever on the Buffalo Wings, but when we looked at him many, many years ago as a international amateur free agent back in 2038, so over 2 decades ago in Game Time, thought he could be an all-time pitching great if he fully developed, and he certainly has. 38 years old, and he's coming off a year when he was 16-7 with a 3.66 ERA, 246 strikeouts. Still has an absolutely incredible profile for any pitcher, much less a 38-year-old. Still an Iron Man, still throwing in the mid-90s. And you can see he has won 6 Cy Young Awards over the course of his career. 249 wins and 152 losses. Over 5,000 strikeouts with a career ERA under 3 and a WAR of 110.5. He's had some absolutely incredible seasons. 2-time 20-game winner. Probably the best season was the 20-7 record as a 26-year-old in 2048. Led the league with 244 and a third innings, 362 strikeouts, the second most of his career, a 1.62 ERA, which was not surprisingly the best of his career. 13.3 strikeouts per 9 inning, 91% quality starts, a ridiculous 46 FIP minus, and an 11.1 WAR. So Zambrana, whose nickname for some reason is B-Tram, has had an almost perfect major league career. Honestly, at 38, with the way that his profile looks, it's conceivable that he could get to 300 wins, which is pretty crazy in this day and age of 5-inning pitchers, 5-inning starters. And while the Orioles were going for a three-peat, they made it to the playoffs, but they dropped wild card series 2-1 in the first round to the Mariners. Tigers ended up sweeping the World Series, taking out the Colorado Rockies 4-0 to win here in 2059. And a big Hall of Fame class here in 2060 contains some very familiar names from the playthrough. Andres Partida, excellent starting pitcher who I think won multiple Cy Young Awards. Yep, 4 of them. Irving Barunda, who started his career with the Expos and had some monster seasons with the Expos, finished with over 3,000 hits, over 600 homers, over 1,800 ribbies, WAR of close to 115, and won, looks like, 6 MVP awards. Daniel Correjo, second baseman, another member of the 3,000 hit club, more of a Deshaun Seifu type profile, quite honestly, with 661 doubles and 155 triples, 859 stolen bases. Although his hits and batting average are slightly above what Seifu did, Seifu has more runs scored, more doubles, more triples, and more stolen bases than Correjo did in his excellent career. You can see, as expected, Shamar Jenneret has dropped from the ballot, and Rojas and Vidale down to 31.2 and 28.1% in the fifth year on the ballot for both of those players, with clearly most votes going to that very impressive first-year class. Haven't even mentioned Alejandro Morales. All he did was hit 581 home runs, almost 1,600 ribbies, perennial silver slugger and all-star who won an MVP, and he's kind of the afterthought in that very impressive Hall of Fame class here in 2060. And Arturo Casares, despite having an off year last year, going to be making almost $20 million one-year deal with the Cubs. We have made it to opening day. Will this finally be the year when we don't recognize anybody on the Buffalo Wings roster? Nope, we still recognize Jesus Heredia, former draftee of ours, a supplemental pick, number 39 overall in 2047. Heredia, as we've talked about, a perennial 300 hitter, 306 career average, closing in on 1,500 career hits. Given that he's going to be turning 32 relatively shortly, probably not realistic to think that he's going to get to 3,000 for his career, but he is an Iron Man, so if he's able to go out and get 180 to 200 hits a year, which is generally what he's done when he's been healthy, and have another 7 or 8 healthy seasons, he can certainly make a run at it. I'd say the odds are against him. We may never know the answer. But Heredia having a nice career, so that is a familiar name. And he's kind of the only familiar name left at this point. Let's see what his contract status is. He's signed for this year and next year. So still going to be in Buffalo unless they happen to trade him away. Taking a look at the preseason predictions now. Mariners expected to win 96 games, best in the American League, but the world champion Tigers expected to win the AL East. Over in the National League at 83 and 79, the Wings expected to be out of the playoffs, but to continue that streak of winning records. We'll see whether or not they can execute on it very shortly. Shortly for you. I'm going to be sitting around doing nothing for a while the season is running on my computer. And some big numbers for some former Wings this year. Both Juan Toledo and Arturo Casares hit the 400th home runs of their career. Ernesto Zambrana, who we were talking about, 15 and 11 with a 3.65 ERA, earned his 250th win and also no-hit the Red Sox as a member of the Yankees. I believe the last time I remember that happening was Dave Righetti. I believe it was 83. If I was a betting man, it might have been 84, but I think it was 83. Don't know that it's happened since then. If it was, there was a time in the late 90s when the Yankees were throwing a lot of no-hitters during that dynasty. So it's possible I've missed one. But always good to see the Yankees no-hit the Red Sox. And the Wings ended up having a excellent season. They are back in the playoffs for the first time in 4 years, and they won tied for the Major League best 99 games, tied with the Cubs for the best record in baseball, edged the Phillies by 1 game. Monster season from Arturo Contreras. I don't know anything about him. Number 2 prospect in baseball. Signed for only $570,000 with the Buffalo Wings organization. So I'm assuming he's had some. Yeah, he looked like a very middling prospect for many seasons, and then he has exploded into potentially being a future Hall of Famer with those ratings. And first year in the major leagues, leads the league with 47 homers, 120 ribbies, a 6.9 WAR. Would expect to see him get some significant MVP votes, and I would be shocked if he is not the Rookie of the Year. We'll see how these Buffalo Wings do during the postseason here. Before we do, though, let's check in. And Heredia hit 294, 9 homers, 75 ribbies. So still a pretty productive offensive player. Added 185 hits to his total, scored 100 runs, and led the league with 51 doubles. And unfortunately for the Buffalo Wings, they were the 99-win team in the National League that didn't make it to the World Series. The 99-win Cubs edged the Mariners, who led the American League in wins 4-3 in a hard-fought World Series for a championship in 2060 for the Cubs. The Tigers, the Mariners, the Wings, and the Cubs, all 4 of the division winners, made it to the NLCS and the ALCS this season. And Arturo Casares getting himself some cash. $83 million a year over 3 years. Had a nice bounce back season. 31 homers, 96 ribbies, and a 275 average. That is an insane contract. It looks like he was supposedly only looking for $1.8 million. That doesn't seem right, but I guess he hasn't technically signed with them yet. All right, he's still on the market. I would be surprised if anyone gives him $34 million a year at the age of 38. Good for him if he can get it. Taking a look at the Hall of Fame voting results. Nehemiah Ravenel, the only player elected. Max Clark, Daniel Rojas, and Nehemiah Vidale all still lurking on the ballot, but none of them seem probable to get in, although Max Clark is up to 70.6%. Wasn't too far this year, but his 8th season on the ballot. We'll see whether he can close out the deal or not. Oh, our old shortstop, Jaheim Lawal, was short for us for a few years. Got some Hall of Fame votes, but dropped from the ballot. And after 5 seasons of action, we'll check in on the list of players that were still playing 5 years ago. Ben Drake has ended up in the majors, not what we hoped when we picked him up. 27-14 career record with 4 saves and 56 holds, working out of the bullpen. Slightly above average in terms of his ERA plus, slightly below average in terms of his FIP minus. I guess he's more than slightly above average in terms of his ERA plus, but barely, or not even a 1 WAR over 279 games in his career. So hate the Drake, has not ended up the way we expected. Ron Sedano, who we thought could be an interesting 2-way player, never made it above the AA level, and then played a couple years in independent ball before calling it a career. So Sedano was a first-round pick that did not really work out. Jesus Heredia, we followed his career closely. He still could have 1 year left with Buffalo at the age of 33. 1,651 hits, over 400 doubles, and a career .304 hitter with a 34 WAR, all in Buffalo over the last decade or so. Caleb Leamy, 122 and 103 with a 3.73 ERA, 34.4 WAR, a nice but not great career. Caleb Creveling, 84 and 96, a bit below average in terms of his ERA plus and FIP minus, less than a 10 WAR for his career. He's actually was at a 9.4 WAR in Buffalo, and over the 4 other teams he's played on, he's actually been below replacement level since he left the Buffalo Wings. Juan Toledo, still in the majors, hit 226 with 12 homers in 199 at-bats for the Yankees. Wrecked physically, not sure how much longer he's going to be around, making a massive amount of money, or he made a massive amount of money this year. Looks like he is a free agent. Or no, he signed with the Yankees, it says. But we're heading into the 2061 season. It does not appear to me that he is actually signed with the Yankees. He was with the Yankees last year, and he is not signed with anybody else that I can tell. Josh Fuchs is now retired. Didn't do too much after his Buffalo days came to an end. Over 1,000 hits, 75 homers, 504 ribbies, 15 WAR over the course of his career. And he did end up winning a Gold Glove in 2057 with the Washington Nationals. So nice to see Fuchs get a Gold Glove to go with the 5 World Series championships he has, as well as an NLCS MVP award in 2051. Arturo Casares, still looking for a job, closing in on 2,000 hits, 426 homers, 1,317 ribbies, a 62.3 WAR. Danny Black, also looking for a job. He is not really a major league pitcher anymore, although he was with Houston last year. He's had some rough years, working more often than not out of the bullpen the last couple years. 15 major league seasons. I'd be pretty surprised if he gets a 16th. 168 and 118 record with a 368 ERA, but those first 5 years of his in Buffalo were the pinnacle of his career. He was 86 and 26 in Buffalo. Since leaving Buffalo, he is 82 and 92, so he's been a below 500 pitcher ever since he left the Buffalo Wings. Chad Aguirre, a really good left-hander with Buffalo, ended up retiring at the age of 33, 51 and 36 record with a 2.48 ERA. Even his last year, he was 10 and 3, 12 saves, 9 holds, 107 strikeouts over 92 and 2/3 innings, and a 3.30 ERA. Wonder if maybe he had an injury that ended his career. You would think he would come back after that. Looks like he just became a minor league nomad for some reason, although his stuff took a pretty sharp drop between the 2056 and 2057 seasons. Jim Reichert, now retired, over 2,000 hits, almost 500 homers, almost 1,500 ribbies, 30.7 career WAR. Was at his best in Buffalo early in his career when he led the National League in runs batted in 3 consecutive years. Was not a great defensive player, which kept his WAR down. 250 career hitter. Guy who had incredible potential. Won an MVP award in 2046 in his first full year in the majors, but could argue maybe a little bit of wasted talent given what we thought he could become, since he seemed like a potential Hall of Famer. Ramiro Medina's career is over. 2,300 hits, 476 doubles, 323 homers, scored 1,300 plus runs, drove in over 1,100 runs, stole 340 bases, 62.8 WAR over the course of his career, 4 All-Star appearances, and 6 World Series championships. Probably a borderline Hall of Famer, but probably in the mix because of he's a second baseman. You can see he's just above average in terms of jaws, but the rest of the metrics he does fall a little bit short. But I thought that 62.8 WAR might get him some votes as a second baseman. Jim Lance, another guy whose career kind of went downhill after he left Buffalo, finished 172 and 106 with a 3.34 ERA, but 137 and 62 in Buffalo. So after he left Buffalo, his career record was 35 and 44. Had a sub-3 ERA in Buffalo with a 50 WAR, 62.7 WAR for his career. Think he'll probably come up a bit short in the Hall of Fame voting. 172 wins is not incredible. Also, although it's not too far behind Alexis Barajas in terms of his WAR, Barajas was a perennial all-star who also won a Cy Young Award. And then Floyd Auclair, what an interesting career. 107 wins and 95 losses, 288 saves, 228 holds, 2.86 career ERA, 12.5 strikeouts per 9 innings, and a 51.9 WAR. Very nice career for Mr. Auclair. Before we finish up this episode and this series, we're going to check in on the Buffalo Wings all-time leaders. See Deshaun Seifu presumably still all over it, but Jesus Heredia with that 304 average is now the highest career batting average. Juan Estrada still the on-base percentage leader. Shamar Jenneret slugging percentage and OPS. Career WAR, still Seifu with an 84. Danny Ferguson ends up second all-time. Seifu and Ferguson, the only players with over 2,000 career games for Buffalo. Seifu in at-bats, Seifu in runs. Danny Ferguson and Jim Reichert just missed joining the 1,000-run club in a Buffalo uniform. Danny Ferguson just missed joining Seifu in the 2,000 hit club. Seifu, of course, in the 3,000 hit club. Total bases, Reichert just over 3,000, and Danny Ferguson one lousy single away from 3,000 career total bases with Buffalo. Seifu with 703 doubles and 197 strikeouts, top 10 all-time in both of those categories. Not surprising that he's still Buffalo's leader. The 3 men who were the middle of the order for our last championship teams in Buffalo, Reichert, Toledo, and Casares, all finished with over 300 career homers in a Buffalo uniform. Reichert almost 400. Reichert, Casares, and Ferguson, followed by Toledo and Seifu, the only Buffalo Wings with over 900 ribbies. Seifu, of course, number 2 all-time in steals behind Rickey. Ferguson with over 1,000 walks. Turning to the pitchers in the history of this franchise. Nehemiah Vidale, Floyd Auclair, and Joe Scott, along with Luis Palencia, Lorne Walborn, Danny Black, and Jim Lance, all finished with sub-3 ERAs. 4 pitchers with over 100 wins, but only Alexis Barajas with over 200. Danny Black and Luis Palencia, as well as Nehemiah Vidale, all won 75% or more of their decisions. Joe Scott, number 1 in saves, followed by Floyd Auclair, Bryce Miller, and Chris McClintock. Barajas, number 1 in WAR among pitchers, a bit above Lance. Floyd Auclair, 42.3, clearly number 3 all-time. Auclair, the leader in games. Barajas, the leader in games started. Barajas with almost 2,500 innings pitched. Strikeouts over the course of his career, Barajas and Floyd Auclair, both over 2,000. Nilson Cavazos, the most strikeouts per 9 innings, Auclair second overall. Career whip, Lorne Walborn, Jim Lance, Floyd Auclair, 1, 2, 3. And that is what the Buffalo Wings career leaders look like at this point. Looking at the team index, can see it's been a little different since our 127 win team, but they did keep the playoff streak going for 6 times, and they've added 2 more appearances since then. So 8 playoff appearances for Buffalo in the 12 years after we left, 2 World Series championships since we left, and they still maintain that streak of never having had a losing season since their second year in the majors in 2027. And one of the things that we talked about at the end of our time playing the Buffalo Wings was who was on my Mount Rushmore. At that time, it was Deshaun Seifu and Alexis Barajas. As well as Jim Lance and Ishmael Velasco. But it's interesting that when we stopped being general manager, only Seifu had a retired number for the Buffalo Wings. He has since been joined by his longtime teammate, Alexis Barajas, who are both Hall of Famers. And then Floyd Auclair and Joe Scott have also had their numbers retired by the Buffalo Wings. Scott, a longtime closer. Auclair, a occasional starter, a longtime stopper, and he became a closer in the late stages of his career with the Buffalo Wings. So the game has voted for its Mount Rushmore, and there are 3 pitchers, which is perhaps fitting given how good the pitching was over much of our tenure in Buffalo, as well as the greatest Buffalo Wing of all time, Deshaun Seifu. And with that, this fun journey with the Buffalo Wings has come to an end. For those of you who are still listening and are watching, I assume you're some of the diehards of this series, and thank you very much for supporting me and supporting this series over the past 10 months. It's been a lot of fun, and without the encouragement and the interaction and the comments and the thoughts and opinions, it would have never gone on this long, and it would have never been as fun. So thanks again for watching. Hope you'll join us with our long play in OOTP 25, which will hopefully be starting in the next couple of weeks after another patch or 2 is released. In the meantime, we're still playing a mini-series with the Yankees and hope to put out another couple of tutorials in the coming weeks as well. Until the next time we put out one of those things I just talked about. Thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.